Hello, welcome to Get Well Soon, a show where students just like you discuss life, school, and wellness, and as well as how they tie together. I'm Kefe.
And I'm Dale.
And today we're going to discuss mental health stigma in school and its negative effects on students.
Today we're joined by Miss Haynes and Miss Brown. Miss Haynes is a school adjustment counselor who facilitates counseling for students, works with teachers and administrators to support student progress. And Miss Brown is a school counselor who supports students in social, emotional, and post-secondary academic planning.
Okay, so to start off, for students who may not know what mental health stigma really is, how would you guys define it?
So I define mental health stigma as a negative view towards mental health, right? So a lot of people don't understand mental health, and stigma comes from a lack of understanding mental health and disabilities that go along with that.
You know, it could be looking at someone and saying that maybe there's something wrong with them, right? That's sort of the stigma part, maybe because they're having a hard time, and that's sort of the stigma where there's that lack of understanding that maybe there's a deeper rooted issue.
And I think you see it a lot on television, in movies, things like that, where if somebody with a mental illness is negatively portrayed, it kind of then encompasses everybody with that mental health issue. So I think social media and movies and television don't help correct that stigma or make anything better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you think that this stigma can affect students?
Really significantly. I think, you know, all you students at all different ages, right? Teens, children, you're all growing and going through so much, and you are all trying to balance school and work for some of you and your activities while finding out who you are and being a friend and a son or a daughter. And there's a lot of hats that you wear while you're growing and doing all this. And I think, you know, there can be some challenges that go with that, some mental health challenges. And I think the stigma part can come from a couple places, right? Primarily, I personally, I feel like, and I'd love to hear what Ms. Haynes thinks too, but I feel like I see the stigma happening almost more with your generation from like adult to you guys. I don't see it as much student to student. I in my heart, I really believe in your generation as the change agent for this mental health stigma, and it feels good. And I'm hoping that these types of conversations are going to move that forward more, right? So that the students who are still kind of hiding behind their fear of being judged are able to feel like they can step forward. But, you know, I do see a lot of adults that grew up. I know when I was growing up, there were a lot of words that were thrown out there that were really offensive to anyone with a mental health stigma that people would just casually use as a joke. And I think that kind of created a stigma. And so our generation is used to keeping quiet about mental health. And so where your generation is starting to talk about it more, I think it's a little scary for some adults. And that's the stigma that I see you guys facing from some adults. And then there are some students, you know, people, of course, who still don't quite have that understanding.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the barrier that comes up is a lot of times students have this negative view of talking to a counselor, and I think a lot of that stems from parents and different generation, different cultures. I often have students have to come with another student like, oh, Dale told me that it's easy to talk to you, or I can come talk to you, I feel better about it. But then when I call home, there can be that like, we'll take care of it. I don't really believe in that stuff. Sometimes it's, you know, religious reasons, like, you know, we'll take care of it at church, things like that, and that can create a barrier. So my hope is that your generation is looking to change that pattern and be the first generation of individuals who are willing to change that view and get rid of that stigma as much as possible. There's always going to be there, cross-culturally, doesn't matter where you live, it's going to be there, but maybe you guys can help change that.
Well, to build off of this, is it possible that simply asking for help could, calm down this mental health stigma a bit?
I think so. I think that somebody's willingness to ask for support, to ask for help, and then taking that experience and translating that to their friends, or saying like, oh, it was great, we talked about this, or it was hard, but I felt better afterwards. And one of the things I tell students all the time, whether it's the teams I coach or our, academically students, it's the biggest thing you can learn, the biggest lesson you can learn is being able to ask for help. Whether it's academically, socially, emotionally, like it doesn't make you weak. You don't have to let your pride get in the way. It's actually, I think, a better thing to be willing to ask for help than to think that you can do it all on your own. And it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't make you less than or weak.
Yeah.
I actually think it makes you stronger, your willingness to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. I see it as a sign of strength, being able to ask for help. And, understandably, with where there's still a bit of a stigma, some people are afraid to do that. So, again, these conversations and people who, see it and really get it, letting our friends know that, like, if they say, hey, I'm having a bad day or hard time, or when your friend tells you that something's going on, encouraging them. I think just hearing from a friend, it's okay, I understand, or something like that, and don't be afraid to talk to someone, makes them feel like, oh, it is okay, for that person who might not know that. So I think it's a really big deal.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, because I kind of feel like a lot of students kind of feel like it's them versus the world, and they're kind of like it's all up to me, or like you have to be like self-made. But I kind of realized that, like, just looking back at all the years at school, like all the teachers who kind of came before to like help me get to where I am, and my parents too, that were able to provide me with resources and bring me to school, all of that, I kind of realized that like it takes a village, right, to raise a kid, and like you're not really alone, and there's so many people who want you to succeed, in your family, your friends, your teachers, and it's important to not forget that, I think.
School is one of the biggest parts of the village.
Yeah.
You're here almost 40 hours a week, 180 days of the year. You play sports, things like that. And I always tell students, and try just one staff member, build a connection with just one, because that one staff member could make the difference between success or even knowing, like, I'm having a terrible day. I can go talk to that one staff member that has made an impact. And I think sometimes as staff members, we don't even realize that one conversation made a difference, because we're having so many of those conversations every day.
Yep.
But I think it's important to build those connections.
It's so true. And I kind of, going off of what you two were just talking about, I was reading an article that Miss Haynes actually shared with me that talked a lot about the mental health stigma. We were kind of looking at it, and I found an interesting statistic. It said 3/4 of teens seeking information about depression were looking for personal anecdotes from others who suffered from something like that. And it kind of goes to show that, like, while teens might be looking for understanding, I think they're also looking to know that they're not alone. And that's a big part of the stigma, is knowing that it's not just you, right? That other people feel that way too. And that's where this, we can break that stigma, is by talking about it, not being afraid to say it.
I kind of agree with that, because I kind of feel like a lot of the times, like, everyone's kind of projecting like their best self, like especially like on Instagram. So it always looks like everyone's like doing well or doing perfect. But I mean, honestly, I wouldn't really know, but I know that with me personally, like, there's a lot of struggles as well as the successes, and I'm assuming, talking to my friends, I know I can see that they're also struggling as well, despite how everything seems,
Yeah. Wish we could get rid of social media.
Yeah.
I think that has a very big impact. But, at the same time, I follow a lot of accounts on Instagram that are for mental health, and I learn a lot from them. And then I have to remind myself of, like, the Instagram effect. Like, what you see is not always, they took that one picture and then 2 minutes later they were having an argument with somebody, right, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I feel like people use, like, social media or Instagram in this case maybe to, like, hide their, like, struggles in life, because maybe them getting that attention from social media, it kind of feeds them, and it kind of gives them a better perception of themselves, even though the lights aren't the brightest in their lives.
Yep.
So
That's a great way to word it.
yeah,
that's true. You get those little happy points every time you get a like or a positive comment or views, and right, it's all sort of false, right? It's not how we really should create a strong sense of self, and right, but it kind of can give us those happy points that makes us feel like, okay, these bad things happening aren't as bad, because people are liking me on social media, and it's like it kind of pushes that, it suppresses the actual root of the problem, which could be some sort of mental health struggle, right?
Because if they don't get those likes, everything changes.
Exactly. When that's unhealthy, when you start relying on that. So social media can be a huge detriment to mental health, I think, if we rely too heavily on our own self-worth,
What should a student do if they have concerns surrounding their own or someone else they know is mental health?
Great question. We have a great group of support staff here. Even just your teacher, because your teacher knows who the support staff are if you don't know. As well as, so I find that sometimes students are very anxious or scared to come, like get their foot in the door and have that first interaction. So I always tell students, like, send me an email. Like, if you feel like you can't ask for that help or, get your foot through my door, send me an email. Or I'll tell their friends, like, hey, bring them down. Sometimes that's what I do when I meet a student for the first time, is I have either a student come in on the first time or a staff member that has a good relationship to kind of bridge that gap. And what that says is, like, my best friend Dale trusts Miss Haynes, so I feel like I can trust Miss Haynes too. So sometimes having those peer supports or even a teacher support bridge that first connection is really important.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. You said it really well. It's about remembering that all of your teachers and every single adult in this building, really no matter what the role is, are here because we care so much about students, and we're here to support you beyond the walls of the classroom. So I think, like Ms. Haynes said, knowing that, one, don't be afraid to ask for help, but if you're afraid to, like, walk into the counseling office or something, send an email or talk to a teacher maybe after a class or when it's quiet or something, and whatever feels right for you. But definitely getting to that adult is priority number one, because they will get you to exactly where you need to be to have the conversations that you really kind of want to have. Yeah,
Definitely find somebody to connect with.
yeah.
So how do you think that, as students, what can a student do to kind of change or remove the stigma surrounding mental health in their school?
Talk about it.
Yeah, talking about it, being open about it, and honestly, the teasing or making fun of somebody, or it needs to stop, because that continues the stigma of that something is wrong with that person. And I think we all need to, like, I always, whenever I say crazy, like, oh man, that's crazy, I have to remind, like, that's a really difficult word for us to, like, we're not all going to remove it from our vocabulary, but, like, those are the words that are used or were used to describe somebody with a mental illness.
Yep.
And, like, history has shown, like, we take a look at the people before these medications were developed. And so you look at someone with schizophrenia who these medications weren't developed at that time, who's having delusions or hallucinations, and you think they can't be here, they can't be in this culture, they're dangerous to themselves, they're a menace to society, whatever. And then that just perpetuates over and over again. And I think that's where the huge problem is. So I think being supportive of one another, reminding each other that it's okay to not be okay, right? Like, that's our it's okay to not be okay.
Yep.
And mental health is health, right? We talk about those sayings all the time. But the biggest thing is to try to move towards acceptance of this being a part of many people's lives, and knowing that most mental illness is not visible. And I'm sure that there are many, probably a vast majority of our students who are struggling with some sort of mental health issue, but nobody knows it, and we hide it, we see it. I'm sure a lot of our staff members are as well. Like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, right? Like,
Exactly.
it's there. People are learning to cope with it, but we have to just accept that people can be emotional, people can have anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. That doesn't make them less than anybody else.
Exactly.
They just need different supports to help them.
Yeah, it's so true. You think about sort of our brains, right? And how complex they are. And if you really take a minute to think about it, it's incredible. We can't expect such a significant, such a complex thing to work perfectly all the time, right? And that's okay, right? We're all just kind of like hardwired, and we have things happen in our life that aren't always in our control. And I think just being able to sort of acknowledge it, like you said, it's kind of like what you said, like how we talk about, like, mental health is health, just like you fall down and break your arm, you're not going to be so embarrassed to tell someone it just kind of happened, And I think looking at mental health that same way and saying that it's okay to not be okay is really significant. Just starting to believe it, right? in your core. For some people, it's hard to believe. Maybe I know we talked a little bit about culturally, religious wise. Some people are told that mental health is a problem, that it's a problem if you're not feeling your best, or it's a shame if you talk to someone when you're not feeling well. I think, and that's really difficult because that's something that gets deep rooted and really ingrained in us from a young age. But I think starting to have those conversations and with yourself even, and those affirmations of knowing that it's okay to not be okay is where we can really start internally, and then supporting one another as we sort of move through life with the ups and the downs.
And your generation can hopefully break the cycle, break the pattern of the stigma, be more willing to accept help, support. We talk a lot about like generational trauma, right? And if people are experiencing these things in themselves, in their families, or in the past, maybe they had a negative experience, and that one experience with whoever it might have been completely pushes everything away. Like, no, I had this one person who tried to help me. It went really bad. I'm not doing it again. It's like, it's important, I think, for your generation to break the pattern. And I would say, like, a lot of our students are first generation American students, and culturally it can be very difficult to even talk about at home, let alone say, I'd like to go see somebody to talk to at school or at home. And, this is your chance to try and change the views of mental health, and say, like, this, say it hard to say, but like, it's normal to not be normal. I don't know if we could say it like that, but it's normal to suffer or struggle with different pieces of your mental health. And knowing that, like, having anxiety doesn't equal having an anxiety disorder. Being sad or depressed doesn't mean that you have depression. We all suffer once in a while from anxiety. We get nervous about something, but that doesn't mean you have anxiety or you have a mental health issue that you need to tackle. Like, we all face these things. It's when it becomes, a bigger problem where it's hindering your academics, your social life, your family life. That's when it's something that, like, okay, we need to find a way to dig deeper here. But being anxious doesn't equal having anxiety.
Right.
Being sad doesn't equal depression.
And it's so true. I think about, some of our most vulnerable and underserved populations, the homeless population, even people who end up in prison too. Statistically, those populations are largely made up of people with mental health issues. Very largely. And I think we as a society kind of fail those people who end up there because we're not catching that sooner, and that it starts now. It starts when we're young. It starts, as soon as it can start. And that's with accepting that it's okay to struggle, but it's not okay to not do something about it, right? It's okay. We're going to have bad days. Yes, we don't have to, make that a big thing, right? It's not always a big thing. We're going to have bad days, but when it, like Ms. Haynes was kind of saying, when it starts to impact your daily life, the way you think and feel on a daily basis, if it's hard to get out of bed, if it's, if your grades start slipping, things like that, that's when it's time to step back and say, all right, I'm going to talk to someone, see what happens.
I think all in all, as well as kind of being more understanding and being more open to mental health and accepting that in others. I think another thing that can be done in schools to kind of change the stigma is also just like kind of being nice to people and kind of saying hello to them. Because I know like for me personally, things have been with school has been a little bit hard, and even on bad days when people say hello to me and they're just nice to me, it just makes everything feel a lot better, and I kind of remember that I'm not alone in this.
You don't have to be friends with everybody, but you should be kind to everybody. Like, being kind doesn't mean like you have to be friends with that person, but it doesn't take much out of your half a second to say hi. And honestly, there's some kids who just need that hi from somebody, like that one hello, that one, hey, why don't you come sit with us, even if you don't talk to them the whole time. That can change
Someone's day significantly.
We'd like to thank Ms. Haynes and Ms. Brown here for their time today, and thank you everybody for listening, and we hope you learned something. I'm Dale.
I'm Cafe.
And this is Get Well Soon. See you later.
Thanks, guys.